"Why is my mother's picture here?" she asked. Mafia boss smiled. "Because she once saved my life." The steam rising from the commercial espresso machine hissed violently, masking the heavy sigh that escaped Lila Carter's lips. It was raining in Riverton. A cold, gray downpour that slicked the city streets and made the windows of the downtown cafe weep with condensation. Lila wiped a rag across the counter, her movements automatic after a double shift that had started before sunrise. Every muscle in her body ached, a dull thrum of exhaustion that she had learned to live with over the last 3 years. At 25, Lila felt older than her age. Most of her friends from high school were out navigating entry-level marketing jobs or planning weekend trips to the coast. Lila was juggling graduate school loans that felt like a stranglehold and working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over her head. But the financial weight was nothing compared to the hollow space in her chest that had existed for exactly 10 years. Danielle Carter, her mother. The anniversary of her death had passed 2 weeks ago, marked by a solitary visit to a gravesite that Lila could barely afford to maintain. The police report had been brief and dismissive. They called it a random robbery gone wrong. They said Danielle was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, walking home from a late shift at the hospital. Case closed. Lila had never believed it. Her mother was smart, cautious, and knew every shadow in Riverton. She would not have walked into a trap unless she had no choice. But a 15-year-old girl with no father and no money had no power to fight the police department. So the case went cold, and Lila learned to survive alone. The bell above the cafe door jingled, letting in a gust of damp wind and a group of men in expensive raincoats. They took a booth near the back, their voices carrying over the low hum of the refrigerator. "You see the papers this morning?" one of them asked, shaking out a wet umbrella. "Moretti is shutting down half the chaotic traffic downtown for this gala tonight. The man buys the city a new pediatric wing and thinks he owns the pavement," another scoffed. "I don't care how many checks Adrian Moretti writes. You don't get that kind of money in construction without burying a few bodies in the foundation." Lila kept her head down as she ground fresh beans. Adrian Moretti. The name was a constant vibration in Riverton, somewhere between a celebrity and a ghost story. He was the head of the Moretti organization, a business empire that everyone knew was built on old Mafia money. Even if the current generation claimed legitimacy, to some, he was a dangerous criminal who held the city by the throat. To others, he was a savior who funded schools when the government failed. "He's just cleaning up his image," the third man argued. "A charity gala at the Grand Hotel? It is a costume. Underneath the tuxedo, he is the same as his father." Lila tuned them out. She did not have the energy to care about the moral complexities of Riverton's elite. She just needed to finish her shift, go home, and study for her midterms. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The door to the back office swung open, and Stan, the cafe owner, rushed out. He looked frantic, his thinning hair standing on end. He spotted Lila and practically sprinted toward the counter. "Lila, thank God you are still here," Stan said, breathless. "I am clocking out in 10 minutes. Stan," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Don't look at me like that. I need a favor." "A big one," Stan pleaded, leaning over the counter. "You know the catering company that was supposed to handle the VIP overflow for the Moretti Gala tonight? Their van broke down on the interstate. The hotel manager is a cousin of mine. He called me 5 minutes ago begging for 3 experienced servers to fill the gap. I have 2 guys from the morning shift willing to go, but I need a third. I need someone who knows how to handle high-end service. I need you." "Absolutely not," Lila said, recoiling. "I have an exam tomorrow, and I have been on my feet for 12 hours. Besides, I am not stepping foot into a room full of mobsters and politicians." "It is triple pay," Stan said, dropping the words like a heavy weight. "Cash, tonight." Lila paused. Triple pay. That was enough to cover her rent for the next 2 months. It would give her breathing room she hadn't felt in years. She looked at the rain battering the window, then down at her scuffed sneakers. "Fine," she whispered, hating herself for it. "But I leave by midnight. No exceptions." 3 hours later, Lila stood on the periphery of the Grand Hotel's crystal ballroom, smoothing the front of the stiff black vest she had been issued. The room was a spectacle of excess. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped crystals from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over hundreds of guests. Women in gowns that cost more than Lila's entire education swirled across the marble floor, while men in tuxedos clustered in tight circles, smoking cigars on the terrace and making deals that would likely reshape the city skyline by morning. Lila moved through the crowd with a silver tray of champagne flutes, practicing the art of invisibility. She was a ghost in the machine of their wealth. She offered drinks with a polite nod, accepted empty glasses, and kept her eyes moving. Then, the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a quiet ripple that started near the main entrance and spread outward. Conversations paused, heads turned. The air in the ballroom seemed to grow thinner, charged with a sudden, sharp electricity. Lila looked toward the double doors. Adrian Moretti had arrived. He was taller than he looked in the newspaper photos, broad-shouldered and imposing, in a black tuxedo that fit him with lethal precision. He had dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that swept the room with a terrifying, controlled intelligence. He didn't walk with the swagger of the other wealthy men. He moved with a predator's stillness, a dangerous calm that made the chaotic room subtly revolve around him. Lila watched, transfixed, as he descended the stairs. He greeted a senator with a handshake that looked more like a warning than a welcome. There was a gravity to him, a weight that pulled at everything in his orbit. For a second, his gaze flickered across the crowd, and Lila felt a strange chill skate down her spine, as if he had seen her specifically through the sea of bodies. But his eyes moved on, and she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She retreated toward the bar, needing to put distance between herself and the center of the room. She set her tray down on the mahogany counter and began rearranging the empty glasses. "Well, hello there," a slurried voice murmured near her ear. Lila stiffened. A man in a slightly disheveled suit was leaning too close, the smell of expensive scotch and stale tobacco clinging to him. He was older, red-faced, and looking at her with a glazed, hungry expression that made her skin crawl. "Can I get you some water, sir?" Lila asked, her voice professional and cold. "I don't want water." The man laughed, reaching out to grab her wrist. His grip was wet and uncomfortably tight. "I want to know why a pretty thing like you is hiding back here with the help." "Please let go of my arm," Lila said, trying to pull back without causing a scene. She knew the rules of these places. The guest is always right, and the staff is disposable. But panic was flaring in her chest. "Don't be like that," the man sneered, tightening his fingers until Lila gasped. "I am a very good friend of the host. I could make your night very profitable if you just smile a little." "She asked you to let go." The voice didn't come from a shout. It was low, icy, and vibrated with such absolute authority that the air around them seemed to freeze. The man holding Lila's wrist went pale. He dropped her arm as if it had suddenly turned white-hot. Lila stumbled back, clutching her wrist, and looked up. Adrian Moretti was standing less than 2 feet away. Up close, the intensity of his presence was suffocating. He wasn't looking at Lila. His dark eyes were fixed on the drunk businessman, void of any emotion other than a cold, terrifying promise of violence. Adrian reached out and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. It looked like a friendly gesture to anyone watching from a distance, but Lila saw the way the man's knees buckled under the pressure of Adrian's grip. "Mr. Henderson," Adrian said softly, "I believe you have mistaken my gala for the kind of establishment where you can behave like an animal." "Mr. Moretti," the man stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. We were just talking. I didn't mean any disrespect." "Disrespecting my staff is disrespecting me," Adrian said. His voice was smooth, polished glass with a razor edge. "Go home, Henderson. Do not make me ask twice." The man scrambled away, disappearing into the crowd as fast as his unsteady legs could carry him. Only then did Adrian turn his attention to Lila. The coldness vanished from his face, replaced by a focused, assessing intensity. He looked at her wrist, where red finger marks were already beginning to bloom against her pale skin. "Are you injured?" he asked. Lila shook her head, her heart hammering against her ribs. Being this close to him was dizzying. He smelled of sandalwood and rain, a clean, masculine scent that cut through the perfume of the ballroom. "I am fine," she managed to say, though her voice trembled. "Thank you." "You didn't have to do that. I owe my staff basic safety," Adrian said. He looked at her, really looked at her, and frowned slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You are shaking. You cannot go back out on the floor like this." "I really am fine," Lila insisted, terrified of losing the triple pay. "I just need a second." "Come with me," Adrian said. It wasn't a request. Before she could protest, he turned and began walking toward a side door disguised as a panel of the wall. He paused, looking back at her with an expectant arch of his brow. Lila hesitated, then followed. She had the distinct feeling that one did not simply say no to Adrian Moretti. He led her down a quiet, carpeted corridor, the noise of the party fading into a dull murmur behind them. The walls here were lined with dark wood and tasteful art. It felt like stepping into the inner sanctum of a fortress. "You can use the restroom in my office to wash your face and regroup," Adrian said, opening a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. "Take as long as you need. I will have the catering manager reassess your station so you are not near the bar." Lila stepped into the office. It was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the rain-slicked city of Riverton. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, covered in neat stacks of files. One wall was lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti," Lila said, feeling small in the massive room. "Adrian," he corrected, closing the door behind them to shut out the hallway noise. "Please." Lila walked further into the room, needing to steady her breathing. She moved toward the bookshelves, her eyes scanning the titles just to give her mind something to focus on. History, philosophy, architecture. It was the library of a scholar, not a gangster. Then, her eyes snagged on something on the second shelf. It was a simple silver frame, tucked between two heavy books on Roman history. It seemed out of place among the expensive decor. Lila froze. The breath caught in her throat, strangling her. She reached out, her hand trembling, and picked up the frame. The photograph was older, the colors slightly faded. It showed a woman standing outside the emergency room entrance of Riverton General Hospital. She was wearing blue scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, blinking against the bright sun. She was smiling, a tired, radiant smile that Lila had not seen in 10 years. It was Danielle. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lila stared at the face of her dead mother. Here, in the private office of the most dangerous man in the city. It made no sense. Her mother was a nurse who struggled to pay bills. Adrian Moretti was a billionaire crime lord. Their worlds should never have touched. "Why is my mother's picture here?" Lila's voice was a whisper, but it cut through the silence of the room like a scream. She didn't turn around. She couldn't take her eyes off the photo. She heard Adrian move behind her. The soft scuff of his dress shoes on the carpet stopped a few feet away. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Turn around, Lila," he said quietly. She turned, clutching the frame to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide, burning with a mixture of confusion and rising anger. "How do you know who she is?" Lila demanded, her voice gaining strength. "How do you have this? Did you know her?" Adrian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The dangerous edge was gone, replaced by a profound, melancholic softness that made him look years younger. He looked at the photo in her hands, then up to her eyes. "I knew her," he said. "That is not an answer," Lila snapped, fear forgotten in the face of this impossible discovery. "My mother was a nurse. She died in a robbery 10 years ago. She had nothing to do with people like you. So I will ask you again. Why is her picture on your shelf?" Adrian took a slow breath. He stepped closer, encroaching on her personal space, but she refused to back down. He held her gaze for a long moment, searching for something in her face. Finally, he offered a faint, bittersweet smile. Because she once saved my life. The words hung in the air between them. Lila felt the floor drop out from under her. Saved his life? Her mother? I don't understand, Lila said, shaking her head. When? How? It was a long time ago, Adrian said, his voice low. I was young, stupid. I got into trouble that I couldn't get out of. Your mother, she was on shift that night. She made a choice. What choice? Lila pressed, stepping forward. What happened that night, Adrian? Did it have anything to do with why she died? Adrian's expression tightened. The shutter came down over his eyes, the mask of the Mafia boss sliding back into place. He glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner, then back at the door. That is a story for another time, he said. I cannot tell you here, not with half the city administration standing 50 feet away. You can't just drop a bomb like that and expect me to walk away, Lila said, her voice shaking with frustration. She is my mother. I have a right to know. And you will, Adrian promised. He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm before he pulled it back, as if stopping himself from touching her. But not now. It is not safe. Safe, Lila repeated. What does safety have to do with a 10-year-old photo? Before Adrian could answer, a sharp knock echoed on the office door. Boss? A gruff voice called from the hallway. The mayor is asking for you for the toast. Adrian let out a sharp breath of annoyance. He looked at Lila, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. There was a tension between them now, a thick, tangled knot of anger, confusion, and a strange magnetic pull that Lila couldn't explain. I have to go, Adrian said. He gently took the photo from her hands and placed it back on the shelf, his fingers lingering on the frame for a second. But I am not letting you out of my sight tonight, not until I know you are secure. I can take care of myself, Lila said defensively. I'm sure you can, Adrian said, opening the door. But tonight, you are with me. He led her back toward the ballroom, but instead of sending her to the kitchen, he gestured to a lavish buffet station set up near the head table. Cover this station, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Stay where I can see you. Lila stood by the buffet, her mind racing. She watched Adrian navigate the room, charming politicians and donors, but she noticed that his eyes constantly flicked back to her, checking, assessing. An hour later, the lights dimmed, and a live band began to play a slow, soulful jazz number. The floor filled with couples swaying to the music. Lila was rearranging a platter of hors d'oeuvres when she felt a presence beside her. She looked up to find Adrian standing there. He wasn't looking at the crowd, he was looking at her. Dance with me, he said. I am working, Lila whispered, glancing around nervously. I will get fired. I own the hotel for the night, Adrian said. You won't get fired. He took her hand, his grip warm and firm, and pulled her onto the edge of the dance floor. Lila felt stiff, conscious of her catering uniform amidst the sea of designer gowns, but Adrian didn't seem to care. He placed his hand on her lower back, pulling her flush against him. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that was almost painful. He was solid, warm, and terrifyingly real. Lila looked up at him, searching his face for answers about her mother, about the secrets he was hiding. Everyone is staring, Lila murmured, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on them. Let them stare, Adrian said, his voice rumbling against her chest. They moved slowly to the music. It was surprisingly intimate. Adrian led her with effortless grace, his body shielding her from the rest of the room. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded, leaving only the heat of his hand on her back and the scent of sandalwood. Lila felt a war raging inside her. She should be running. This man was dangerous. He was part of a world that had likely gotten her mother killed, and yet, being in his arms felt strangely, impossibly safe. You look like her, Adrian said softly, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. She had the same fire. Lila's breath hitched. Tell me the truth. Adrian, please. "Soon," he whispered. The music swelled, and he spun her gently, pulling her back into a dip that left her breathless. For a split second, their faces were inches apart. Lila saw the raw hunger in his eyes, a desire that mirrored the sudden, confusing ache in her own chest. Then the song ended. Adrian straightened, stepping back to a respectful distance, though his eyes didn't leave hers. "Go home, Lila," he said, his voice rough. "My driver is waiting at the back entrance. He will take you to your door." Lila stumbled out of the ballroom, her heart racing, her mind a chaotic storm of questions. She touched her own waist where his hand had been, the ghost of his touch still burning through the fabric of her vest. She had come here for a paycheck. She was leaving with a mystery that threatened to tear her life apart. And as she sat in the back of the black town car speeding through the rainy streets of Riverton, Lila knew one thing for certain. She could not stay away. She had to know why her mother, the nurse, had saved the life of the monster who had just held her, like she was the most precious thing in the world. The rain that had battered Riverton during the gala did not let up. It drummed a relentless, headache-inducing rhythm against the single pane of glass in Lila Carter's bedroom window. Her apartment was a stark contrast to the marble and velvet world she had glimpsed the night before. It was a fourth-floor walk-up with peeling beige paint, a radiator that clanked like a dying engine, and a lingering smell of damp drywall that no amount of scented candles could mask. Lila sat cross-legged on her mattress, surrounded by the tangled sheets of a sleepless night. In her hands, she held a photograph. It was a standard 4x6 print, slightly dog-eared at the corners, showing her mother, Danielle, sitting on a park bench with an ice cream cone. She looked tired in the photo, the dark circles under her eyes visible even through the grain of the film. But she was smiling, for the 100th time that night. Lila compared this image in her mind to the framed portrait sitting in Adrian Moretti's high-rise office. In Adrian's photo, Danielle looked younger, sharper, and possessed of a quiet strength that Lila had only seen in flashes. "Because she once saved my life," Adrian's voice echoed in the empty room, low and resonant. Lila squeezed her eyes shut, trying to banish the memory of his face. She wanted to be furious. She should be furious. A powerful crime boss had a shrine to her mother and secrets about her death, secrets he had hoarded for a decade while Lila scraped by on student loans and grief. The arrogance of it made her blood boil. And yet, beneath the anger, there was something else, a treacherous, unwanted warmth. She couldn't forget the way his voice had cracked, just a fraction, when he spoke of Danielle. It wasn't the tone of a man talking about an employee or a random acquaintance. It was the tone of a man speaking about a saint. Lila tossed the photo onto the nightstand and rubbed her face. She needed answers, and she knew only one other person who might have them. She waited until 8 in the morning to call Aunt Rose. Rose was Danielle's older sister, a pragmatic woman who lived 2 towns over and communicated mostly through birthday cards and brief, worry-filled phone calls. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Lila, is everything okay? It is early." "I am fine. Aunt Rose," Lila said, pacing the small length of her kitchen. I need to ask you something about Mom." There was a pause on the line, heavy and hesitant. "What about her, honey? You know we don't like to dig up the past." "I need to know about her work," Lila pressed, leaning against the counter. "Specifically before she died. Did she ever mention a patient named Moretti? Or anything about trouble at the hospital?" The silence that followed was so long, Lila thought the call had dropped. "Rose?" "Lila, listen to me," Rose said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Your mother was a wonderful nurse. She cared too much. That was her problem. She would work double shifts, nights, weekends. She saw things in that ER that changed her." "What kind of things?" "I don't know details," Rose insisted, though her tone suggested otherwise. "About a year before she died, she got strange, jumpier. She stopped taking certain shifts. She told me once that she got mixed up in something she couldn't fix. She said she helped someone she shouldn't have, and that it was complicated." Lila's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. "Did she say who?" No, Rose said, and I didn't ask. We thought it was just stress. Then the robbery happened, and, well, we left it alone. Why are you asking this now? Lila? Just missing her. Lila lied, her heart hammering. Go back to sleep. Rose, I love you. She hung up before her aunt could ask any more questions. The confirmation sat in her stomach like a stone, mixed up in something. Danielle hadn't just been a random victim. She'd been a player in a game Lila was only just beginning to see. The cafe was chaotic that afternoon. The lunch rush was a blur of shouting customers and clattering dishes, which suited Lila just fine. It kept her from thinking. But as the crowd thinned out around 2 p.m, the strange feeling of being watched returned. Lila was wiping down a table near the window when she saw it. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked across the street, idling in a loading zone. It was sleek, expensive, and out of place among the dented sedans and delivery trucks of the neighborhood. She tried to brush it off. Riverton was a big city. Rich people drove nice cars, but when she glanced out the window an hour later, the car was still there. And when she finished her shift and walked 4 blocks to the bus stop, the SUV pulled out of the spot and crawled slowly through traffic, keeping pace with her. Paranoia pricked at the back of her neck. You are imagining things, she told herself. You are exhausted and overreacting because a handsome mobster danced with you. But the feeling didn't leave. That night, after a grueling evening shift at the cafe, Lila walked home. The rain had turned into a thick mist, obscuring the streetlights. She took her usual shortcut through an alley that shaved 10 minutes off her commute. It was a narrow passage between 2 brick warehouses, usually empty. Tonight, however, the shadows seemed deeper. Lila adjusted her bag on her shoulder and quickened her pace. She was halfway through the alley when a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking her path. He was young, wearing a hooded sweatshirt, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Hey, he said, his voice rough. Give me the bag. Lila froze. I don't have any cash, she said, backing up slowly. Just books and a uniform. I said, give me the bag, the man shouted. Lunging forward, a glint of metal flashed in his hand, a small knife. Lila turned to run, but her foot slipped on the wet pavement. She scrambled for balance, terror seizing her chest. Then, motion erupted from the darkness behind her. A man in a dark coat materialized from the shadows as if he had been woven from the mist itself. He didn't shout, he didn't panic. He moved with a terrifying, fluid efficiency. Before the attacker could close the distance, the newcomer stepped in. He caught the mugger's wrist in one hand and delivered a sharp, precise strike to the man's elbow with the other. There was a sickening crunch, a yelp of pain, and the knife clattered to the ground in one smooth motion. The stranger swept the mugger's legs out from under him, pinning him to the wet asphalt with a knee to the chest. Stay down, the stranger said. His voice was calm, almost bored. The mugger groaned, clutching his arm, all fight drained out of him. The stranger looked up at Lila, who was pressed against the brick wall, hyperventilating. Are you hurt, Miss Carter? He asked. Lila stared at him. He was in his 30s, with a buzz cut and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked like a soldier, and he knew her name. Who are you? She gasped. My name is Nico, he said. Standing up and hauling the groaning mugger to his feet by the back of his sweatshirt, he shoved the thief toward the street. Run. If I see you in this neighborhood again, you won't walk away. The mugger didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled away into the night. Nico straightened his coat and turned to face Lila. I asked if you were hurt. How do you know my name? Lila demanded, the shock turning into a sudden, blazing realization. You are with him. You are with Moretti. Nico didn't deny it. Mister, Moretti asked me to keep an eye on you. He was concerned for your safety. Concerned, Lila repeated, her voice rising an octave. He has you stalking me. That SUV outside the cafe, that was you? I am a security detail. Miss Carter, not a stalker, Nico corrected calmly. And considering what just happened, it seems his concern was valid. I don't need a bodyguard, Lila shouted, the adrenaline crashing into fury. I need to not be followed by the Mafia. You tell your boss to stay the hell away from me. You can tell him yourself. Nico said, unbothered by her outburst. "I will walk you to your door." "Don't touch me," Lila snapped. She spun around and marched out of the alley, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and rage. Nico followed her, staying 10 paces back, a silent, imposing shadow all the way to her apartment building. The next morning, Lila did not go to the cafe. She put on her best blazer, tied her hair back in a severe bun, and marched straight to the financial district. The Moretti Corporation headquarters was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. It looked like a legitimate business, indistinguishable from the banks and tech firms surrounding it. But Lila knew better. She stormed through the revolving doors and approached the reception desk. "I am here to see Adrian Moretti," she announced to the immaculate receptionist. The woman blinked, looking Lila up and down. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. Tell him Lila Carter is here, and I am not leaving until he comes down." "I'm afraid, Mr. Moretti is in meetings all day," the receptionist said with a polite, dismissive smile. "I can leave a message with his assistant." "I don't want to leave a message," Lila said, leaning over the desk. "I want him to stop having me followed." 2 large security guards in suits materialized from the corners of the lobby. They moved toward Lila with practiced intimidation. "Miss," one of them said, reaching for her elbow, "we are going to have to ask you to leave." "Get off me!" Lila shouted, jerking her arm away. "Adrian, I know you can see this. Get down here." People in the lobby were staring. The guards grabbed her, firmer this time, preparing to drag her out. "Let her go." The command came from the mezzanine balcony above. The guards froze instantly. Lila looked up to see Adrian Moretti standing at the railing, looking down at the scene. He was wearing a gray 3-piece suit, his hands resting on the chrome rail. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were locked on hers. "Send her up," Adrian said. The guards released her immediately, stepping back and gesturing toward the elevators. Lila smoothed her blazer, lifted her chin, and walked past them with as much dignity as she could muster. The elevator ride was silent and swift. When the doors opened on the top floor, Adrian was waiting for her. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked into his office, expecting her to follow. Lila marched in after him, the heavy door clicking shut, sealing them in a soundproof bubble high above the city. "You have some nerve," Lila began, the words spilling out before she had even stopped moving. "Sending your goons to follow me? Parking outside my job? Who do you think you are?" Adrian walked behind his desk but didn't sit. He turned to face her, his calmness acting as gasoline to her fire. "I think I am the man who ensured you didn't get stabbed in an alley last night," he said coolly. "Nico reported the incident. You are welcome, by the way." "I didn't ask for your help," Lila yelled, throwing her hands up. "I have lived in this city my whole life. I can handle myself. I don't need a babysitter, especially not one on a mob payroll. You are controlling my life, and I won't have it. I am not controlling your life. Lila, I am trying to preserve it," Adrian shot back, his voice rising for the first time. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. "Do you think it is a coincidence that you were attacked the night after you were seen with me? Do you think people in this city don't talk?" "So this is my fault?" Lila challenged, stepping into his space. She was furious, but beneath the anger, the air between them was crackling with that same electric tension from the gala. Being this close to him was overwhelming. The sheer size of him, the intensity of his gaze. "It is not your fault," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a growl. "But it is my reality. People connected to me become targets, and whether you like it or not, you are connected to me now." "Only because you made me connected," Lila said. "You have my mother's picture on your shelf. You dragged me into this." "She dragged you into this," Adrian roared back. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian looked shocked that he had shouted. He ran a hand through his hair, turning away from her to look out the window at the gray city below. His shoulders heaved with a heavy breath. "I didn't mean that," he said quietly. "Tell me," Lila whispered. "Now. No more excuses. What did she do?" Adrian stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he turned around, his face was stripped of its usual guarded mask. He looked tired, vulnerable. "12 years ago," he began, his voice rough. "I was 22. My father was still running the family. There was a disagreement with a rival faction. I was sent to handle a meeting that turned out to be an ambush." He unbuttoned his suit jacket and loosened his tie, as if the memory was physically constricting him. "I took 2 bullets to the chest, 1 in the leg. My driver managed to get me to the nearest emergency room before he bled out. It was Riverton General." Lila held her breath, her hands clutched together. "The police arrived 5 minutes after I was wheeled in," Adrian continued. "But they weren't there to take a statement. They were on the rival payroll. Corrupt officers. They came into the trauma bay and told the medical staff to step away. They were going to let me bleed out on the table. They said it would be an administrative delay, an accident." He looked up, locking eyes with Lila. Every doctor and nurse in that room stepped back. They were terrified. They knew who my father was, and they knew who the cops were. Nobody wanted to die for a Moretti. Adrian took a step closer to Lila, except one. Lila felt tears pricking her eyes. "My mother." "Danielle," Adrian said, saying the name like a prayer. "She stood between me and the officers. She physically blocked them from the gurney. She told them that if they wanted to touch her patient, they would have to shoot her first. She knew exactly who they were. She knew they could kill her and make it look like crossfire, but she didn't move." He swallowed hard, his eyes shining with a mixture of old pain and undying gratitude. "She stabilized me while they screamed at her. She called in the chief of surgery on the overhead speaker, forcing witnesses into the room so the cops couldn't do anything. She saved me. Lila, I should have died that night, or I was a criminal. I was nothing to her, but she saved me anyway." Lila let out a shaky breath, a tear slipping down her cheek. She could see it. She could picture her mother, small but fierce, standing in front of a dying boy, defying men with guns. It was so perfectly, painfully Danielle. "Did that night," Lila's voice trembled, "is that why she died? Did they come back for her?" "I don't know," Adrian admitted, the words heavy with guilt. "I tried to protect her. I sent money, anonymously. I kept tabs, but 2 years later, she was gone. The robbery report seemed real, but I have never been sure." The anger in Lila's chest had dissolved, replaced by a hollow ache of grief and a strange, reluctant sympathy for the man standing before her. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was the boy her mother had saved. He was the living legacy of her mother's courage. "She never told me," Lila whispered. "She wanted to keep you safe," Adrian said softly. He reached out, and this time, he didn't pull back. He brushed a thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear. His touch was warm, gentle, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. For a moment, they just stood there, the history between them bridging the gap. The attraction was undeniable now, fueled by the shared weight of the past. Lila found herself leaning into his hand, just an inch, wanting to feel more of that warmth. Then, Adrian's phone buzzed on the desk, shattering the moment. He pulled his hand away, clearing his throat. "I need to take this, but we are not done. You need to understand the danger." "I understand," Lila said, though she felt dazed. I need to go home. I need to think." "Let Nico drive you," Adrian insisted. "Fine," she agreed, too drained to fight him. The ride back to her apartment was silent. Nico drove with professional detachment, but he kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. When they pulled up to her building, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. "I will wait here until you are inside," Nico said. Lila nodded and climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment. Her mind was reeling with the image of her mother standing in front of a gun. It changed everything. It made her mother's death feel less like a tragedy and more like a sacrifice. She reached her door and frowned. It was unlocked. Lila knew she had locked it. She always double-locked it. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She pushed the door open slowly. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. The apartment was a wreck. Drawers had been pulled out and dumped onto the floor. Her clothes were scattered everywhere. The sofa cushions were slashed open. stuffing bleeding out onto the rug. Her books were swept off the shelves. It wasn't a robbery. Her laptop was still sitting on the coffee table. Her meager jewelry box was untouched. This was a search. Lila stepped into the kitchen, glass crunching under her boots. The contents of her cupboards were smashed on the linoleum. She spun around, panic rising in her throat, and then she saw it. On the refrigerator, amidst the collection of souvenir magnets, deep gouges had been scratched into the white enamel. The jagged letters formed 3 words: "Stop asking questions." Lila covered her mouth to stifle a scream. The violation felt physical. Someone had been here. Someone knew what she was doing. She heard heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs behind her. "Lila!" It was Adrian. He burst through the open doorway, Nico right behind him. He must have sensed something was wrong, or Nico had alerted him the moment she hesitated at the door. Adrian took in the scene in a single second. The slashed furniture, the scattered clothes, the message on the fridge. His face went deadly pale, then darkened with a terrifying rage. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Lila by the shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her frantically. "Were you here when they did this?" "No," Lila stammered, shaking her head. "I just walked in. Adrian, they wrote on the fridge." Adrian looked at the message, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He turned to Nico. "Clear the building. Check the perimeter. Call the cleaning crew," he barked. "On it," Nico said, drawing a weapon from his jacket as he moved to sweep the bedroom. Adrian turned back to Lila. The anger in his eyes softened as he looked at her. She was shivering, standing amidst the ruins of her life. "I told you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You are connected to me now. This isn't paranoia. Lila, this is a warning." "What do they want?" she whispered. "They want to scare you. They want to bury the truth about your mother," Adrian said. He gripped her shoulders tighter. "I won't let that happen." He looked around the destroyed apartment, then back at her. "You cannot stay here. It is not safe." "I have nowhere else to go," Lila said, tears welling up again. "I can't afford a hotel." "You're not going to a hotel," Adrian said firmly. "Pack a bag, whatever you need for a few days. You are coming with me." "Adrian, I can't—" "Lila," he interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Look at your kitchen. Look at what they did. If you had been home—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable. "I have a secure property, a penthouse downtown. It is a fortress. You will be safe there until I figure out who is sending messages in my name." Lila looked at the message scratched into the fridge again. "Stop asking questions." She looked at Adrian, the man whose life her mother had saved, the man who had looked at her with such raw vulnerability in his office only hours ago. He was dangerous, yes, but standing here, surrounded by the wreckage of her safety, he was the only solid thing in her world. "Okay," she whispered. Adrian let out a breath, releasing her shoulders. "Go. Pack. We leave in 5 minutes." As Lila moved to her bedroom to salvage clothes from the pile on the floor, she knew she was crossing a line. She was leaving her life behind and stepping fully into his. And as terrifying as that was, the thought of being away from him was suddenly, inexplicably, worse. Lila stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse living room, staring out at the sprawling, rain-slicked grid of Riverton. From 40 stories up, the city looked peaceful, a glittering tapestry of amber streetlights and moving headlights. It was a lie, of course. Down there, in the shadows between the buildings, people were hunting for her. Down there, her apartment was a wreck of slashed fabric and threatened messages. Up here, the air was cool and smelled of expensive leather and lemon polish. Adrian Moretti's world was a fortress of silence and steel, separated from the grit of the street by high-speed elevators and layers of biometric security. Yet the silence was not absolute. Just beyond the heavy oak front door, in the corridor, there was the constant, low-frequency hum of handheld radios, Adrian's security team. They were a 24-hour reminder that this luxury was not a vacation. It was a cage. Lila turned away from the window, hugging her arms around her chest. The penthouse was beautiful, Modern art on the walls, plush rugs that swallowed her footsteps, furniture that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine, but it felt vast and lonely. Adrian had disappeared into his study hours ago to field calls about the breach at her apartment, leaving her to wander the halls like a ghost. Her stomach gave a quiet rumble, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since a granola bar early that morning. She navigated her way to the kitchen, a space larger than her entire apartment. It was immaculate, with gleaming marble countertops and appliances that looked like they had never been touched. She opened the massive refrigerator, finding it stocked with organized rows of high-end groceries. She grabbed a carton of eggs, some spinach, and a block of Parmesan cheese, an omelet. She could manage an omelet. Lila found a skillet and set it on the stove, the click of the burner sounding sharply in the quiet room. She was whisking the eggs in a bowl, the rhythmic clinking of the fork providing a small comfort. When she sensed him, she didn't hear him approach, but the air in the room seemed to shift, becoming heavier, charged with a magnetic pull she was learning to recognize. Lila turned. Adrian was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a faint, jagged scar on his left wrist. It was the most casual she had ever seen him, and it made her breath catch in her throat. "I didn't know you could cook," Adrian said, his voice low and tired, but holding a note of amusement. "I am making dinner," Lila said, gesturing with the whisk, "unless you have a rule against guests using the stove. My guests usually prefer to order from the hotel kitchen downstairs," Adrian said, pushing off the doorframe and walking toward the island. "But I prefer home cooking. It smells good." "It is just butter melting," Lila said, turning back to the stove to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. "Do you want some?" "Please," Adrian said. He moved to the other side of the island, watching her work. The tension that had defined their interactions, the fear, the anger, seemed to recede slightly, replaced by a domestic awkwardness that was somehow more intimate. They made small talk as Lila poured the eggs into the pan. Adrian asked about her graduate program. She asked about the art in the hallway. For a few minutes, they were just two people making late-night food in a kitchen, not a mafia boss and the daughter of the woman who saved him. "You need to flip it before the edges burn," Adrian noted, nodding at the pan. "I know how to cook an omelet." "Moretti," Lila teased, reaching for a knife to chop some parsley. She was distracted, though his proximity was a physical weight. As she brought the knife down on the cutting board, her eyes flickered to him for a fraction of a second. The blade slipped. A sharp sting bit into her index finger. Lila gasped, dropping the knife as a bright bead of blood welled up on her skin. "Damn it," she hissed, clutching her hand. Before she could move toward the sink, Adrian was there. He moved with that blurring speed she had seen at the gala, crossing the kitchen in a heartbeat. He took her hand in his grip firm but incredibly gentle. "Let me see," he commanded softly. "It is nothing," Lila said, trying to pull away. "Just a scratch." "Lila, stop!" He didn't let go. He led her to the sink and turned on the cold water, guiding her finger under the stream. The water was icy, but Adrian's hand was warm against hers. He stood close, right behind her shoulder, boxing her in against the counter. She could feel the heat radiating from his chest, smell the subtle, woodsy scent of his cologne mixed with the soap on his skin. He turned off the water and reached for a paper towel, drying her hand with a tenderness that made her heart hammer against her ribs. He inspected the cut closely, his dark brows furrowed in concentration. "It is not deep," he decided, "but we should bandage it." He reached into a drawer near the fridge. He knew exactly where the first aid kit was and pulled out a bandage. He peeled back the wrapper and carefully applied it to her finger, smoothing the adhesive down with his thumb. When he finished, he didn't step back. He held her hand for a moment longer, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a slow, soothing rhythm. Lila looked up and found him watching her. The amusement was gone from his eyes, replaced by a dark, intense focus that made her knees feel weak. He leaned in, just slightly. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air between them crackled, thick and suffocating. Lila felt every detail of him, the roughness of his palm, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the way his pupils dilated as he looked at her. She found herself leaning forward, drawn to him by a force she couldn't control. She wanted him to close the gap. She wanted to know what he tasted like. Adrian's breath hitched. He looked like he was fighting a war inside his own head. His hand tightened on hers for a second, almost painful, and then he forced himself to step back. The loss of his warmth was instant and jarring. "I will finish the omelet," he said, his voice rougher than before. He turned his back to her, focusing intently on the stove. "Go sit down, Lila." Lila stood there for a moment, her hand throbbing not from the cut, but from the ghost of his touch. She let out a shaky breath and retreated to the living room, her mind racing. The storm outside intensified overnight. Thunder rattled the heavy glass panes. But that wasn't what woke Lila. It was a sound from the living room. A low, distressed muttering. Lila sat up in the guest bed, her heart pounding. She checked the digital clock, 3 a.m. She slipped out of bed, pulling her oversized t-shirt down around her knees, and crept into the hallway. The penthouse was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city filtering through the windows. She followed the sound to the main living area. Adrian was asleep on the long leather sofa. He was thrashing, his head turning violently from side to side against the cushion. The blanket had fallen to the floor. "No," he mumbled, his voice thick with panic. "Not breathing. She's not breathing. Pressure. Apply pressure." Lila froze. He wasn't just having a nightmare. He was reliving something. "Blood," Adrian gasped, his hands gripping the leather of the couch until his knuckles turned white. "Sirens! Where are the sirens?" Lila moved without thinking. She crossed the room and knelt beside the couch. "Adrian," she whispered, reaching out to touch his shoulder. He flinched violently at her touch, his whole body seizing up. "Get back," he shouted in his sleep, his voice cracking. "Adrian, wake up," Lila said, making her voice firmer but keeping it soft. "You are safe. You are in the penthouse. Wake up!" He gasped, his eyes flying open. For a second, he looked at her with zero recognition, his pupils blown wide with terror. He was breathing hard, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Lila," he choked out, his voice raw. "I am here," she said, keeping her hand on his shoulder. "It was a dream. Just a dream." Adrian sat up slowly, burying his face in his hands. He took several ragged breaths, trying to bring his racing heart under control. Lila stayed kneeling on the floor, close enough to offer comfort but giving him space. "I am sorry," he muttered into his hands. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize," Lila said gently. He dropped his hands and looked at her. In the dim light, the powerful Mafia boss was gone. In his place was a man haunted by ghosts. He looked young, unguarded, and painfully human. "It was the night," he admitted, his voice barely audible over the rain. "The night your mother saved me. I still dream about it." The blood, the way the lights flickered in the trauma bay, the way she screamed at them to back off. Lila felt a lump form in her throat. She reached out, and this time, she placed her hand directly over his heart. She could feel it hammering against his ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. "She saved you," Lila whispered. "You are alive? Adrian, you are here?" Adrian covered her hand with his own, pressing it tighter against his chest. He looked at her with a desperate intensity, as if she were the anchor keeping him from drifting back into the dark. "I am here," he repeated. They stayed like that for a long time, the silence stretching out. Heavy and charged, it wasn't sexual, but it was the most intimate moment Lila had ever experienced. She was touching the source of his pain, and he was letting her, slowly. Adrian leaned forward. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he buried his face in the crook of her neck and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her off her knees and into the space between his legs. Lila wrapped her arms around his shoulders, holding him as his breathing slowed. It was a soft, lingering hug, born of shared trauma and the quiet of the night. Neither of them rushed to break it. Lila rested her chin on his head, smelling the rain and the sleep on him, and realized with a jolt of terror that she wasn't just attracted to him anymore. She was starting to care for him. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, filling the penthouse with a harsh, revealing light. The vulnerability of the night before had been packed away, but the connection remained. Adrian was dressed in a fresh suit, but his eyes were softer when he looked at her over his coffee cup. "I have something for you," he said. He reached under the kitchen island and pulled out a small, worn cardboard box. He slid it across the marble counter toward her. "What is this?" Lila asked. "When your mother—" "After she died," Adrian corrected himself carefully. "My men went to the hospital. She had a locker in the staff room. We cleaned it out before the police could catalog it. I didn't want them to find anything that could link her to me. I have kept it in storage for 10 years. Lila's hands trembled as she reached for the box. She lifted the lid. Inside, there was a lifetime of small things: a spare stethoscope, a half-used tube of hand cream. The lavender scent hit Lila like a physical blow, bringing a sudden rush of memories of her mother tucking her into bed. There were photos of Lila as a teenager, tucked into the corners of the box. And there was a necklace. A simple silver chain with a small angel pendant. Lila gasped. She remembered her mother wearing this every day. "I thought you should have it," Adrian said quietly. Lila lifted the necklace, tears pricking her eyes. Beneath it, at the bottom of the box, something metallic clinked. She reached in and pulled out a key. It was small, brass, and looked like a safety deposit box key. There were no numbers on it, only a faint, worn engraving of a logo, a stylized lion's head. "Do you know what this opens?" Lila asked, holding it up. Adrian frowned, leaning in to inspect it. "No, I never looked too closely. I respected her privacy." "Nico," Adrian called out. The security chief appeared from the hallway instantly. "Boss? Look at this key. Identify the institution." Nico took the key, squinting at the worn logo. "That is the old First National Bank logo. They rebranded 5 years ago, but the main branch on 4th Street still has the original vault boxes." Lila stood up, clutching the key. "We have to go there." "Lila, no," Adrian said immediately, his voice hardening. "It is not safe for you to be out in the open. I will send Nico. He can retrieve whatever is in the box." "I am going," Lila insisted, her voice shaking but determined. "This is my mother's. Whatever she hid it for a reason, and I am not sitting in this tower while you uncover my family's secrets." "There are people actively hunting you," Adrian argued, stepping closer. "You saw what they did to your apartment." "I am already in danger just for being your secret," Lila shouted back. "If they want to hurt me, they will find a way, but I need to know who she was. Adrian, I need to know why she died. You owe me that." Adrian stared at her, his jaw working. He looked at the determination in her eyes, the same fire he had seen in Danielle's face 10 years ago. "Fine," he growled, "but we take the armored SUV, and you do not leave my side. Not for a second, The trip to the bank was tense. Lila sat in the back of the heavy, bulletproof SUV, watching the city roll by through thick, tinted glass. Adrian sat next to her, his hand resting on his knee, constantly scanning the mirrors. The bank was a relic of an older Riverton, a massive stone building with high ceilings and echoes. The manager, flustered by Adrian's presence, led them into the vault immediately. The air inside the vault was cool and smelled of dust and old paper. Lila's hand shook as she fit the key into box number 402. It turned with a smooth click. She pulled the long metal drawer out and carried it to the viewing table. Adrian stood right behind her, his body acting as a shield even in this empty room. Lila opened the lid. Inside, there was no money, no jewelry. There was a stack of photos and a silver flash drive. Lila picked up the photos first. They were grainy. Likely taken with a disposable camera, they showed a hospital room. In the bed, hooked up to tubes and monitors, lay a young man. His face was bruised, his chest heavily bandaged. It was Adrian. But it wasn't just medical documentation. In the background of one photo, 2 police officers were visible in the hallway, talking to a man in a dark suit. Lila turned the photo over. In Danielle's neat, looping handwriting, she had written, "Officer Miller, an unknown associate, 2 a.m. They are waiting for him to die." Lila picked up a small notebook from the bottom of the box. She flipped through the pages. It was a log. Dates, times, names. October 14th, Moretti Patient Stable. Threats continue. Detective K implies accidents happen during transfer. November 2nd, I heard them talking about the Kovac crew. They are being paid to look the other way. December 10th, I have copies of the shift logs. Proof they altered the admission times. She wasn't just protecting you, Lila whispered, her voice trembling. She was investigating them. She was building a case. Adrian reached over her shoulder and picked up the notebook. His face was pale as he read the entries. "She knew," he said, his voice sounding hollow. "She knew the risks. She knew she was marking herself as a target by keeping these records." Lila felt her knees give out. The weight of it was too much. Her mother hadn't been a victim of random bad luck. She'd been a warrior. She'd been hunting monsters to save a boy she didn't even know. Lila swayed, the room spinning. Adrian dropped the notebook and caught her. His arm wrapped firmly around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was solid as a rock. "I have got you," he murmured into her ear. "She died for this," Lila sobbed, the tears finally breaking free. "She died because she wrote these things down. I won't let it be for nothing," Adrian vowed. His voice was a low rumble against her back, vibrating with a deadly promise. "I swear to you, Lila, we will finish what she started. We will burn them all down." Back at the penthouse, the mood had shifted from grief to a burning intensity. The contents of the box were spread out on the coffee table. The flash drive was plugged into Adrian's secure laptop, though they hadn't decrypted it yet. Lila sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her. She was reading the notebook again, tracing her mother's handwriting. Adrian sat next to her, close enough that their thighs brushed. He was reading a file Nico had brought up, cross-referencing the names in Danielle's notes with his own intelligence. "Detective K," Adrian said, pointing to a line. "That has to be Kovac. He wasn't a detective back then, just a beat cop. Now he runs the precinct." "He killed her," Lila said, her voice cold. "Or he ordered it." "We will find out," Adrian said. He turned to look at her. The distance between them had evaporated. They were shoulder to shoulder, united by a shared enemy and a shared loss. Lila looked up from the notebook and met his gaze. His eyes were dark, searching. He looked at her not just with gratitude or protection, but with a raw, undeniable want. "You have her courage," Adrian said softly. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Lila's breath hitched. The fear of the last few days, the grief, the adrenaline, it all coalesced into a sudden, overwhelming need to feel alive, to feel him. "Adrian," she whispered. He didn't wait. He leaned in and captured her mouth. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was hungry, desperate, and laden with the pent-up tension of the last 48 hours. Lila made a small sound in her throat and turned into him, her hands tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. Adrian groaned low in his chest. His arm swept around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His other hand cupped the back of her head, deepening the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth with a possessive heat that made her toes curl. They collapsed back against the cushions, limbs tangled. Lila felt the hard wall of his chest against her softness, the power in his hands as they roamed over her back, pulling her closer as if he could merge them into one person. It was intoxicating. It was dangerous. It was everything she had been terrified of and everything she wanted. For a minute, there was nothing but the heat of his skin, the taste of coffee and desire, the friction of their bodies pressing together. Then, reality crashed back in. Lila pulled back, gasping for air. Her lips were swollen, her heart racing so fast it felt like it might explode. Adrian chased her for a second, leaning forward, his eyes black with desire, before he realized she was stopping. He froze, his hand still resting on her neck, his chest heaving. "Lila," he rasped. Lila put a hand on his chest, holding him back. She was trembling. "I can't," she whispered. Not like this, not yet." Adrian closed his eyes and took a deep, ragged breath. He rested his forehead against hers, fighting for control. Okay. I need the truth, Adrian," Lila said, her voice shaking but firm. "I need to know everything. What is on that drive? Who exactly killed my mother? I need to know the whole story before I can fall for you." Because she knew, with terrifying certainty, that she was already falling. Adrian pulled back, looking at her with a mixture of regret and fierce admiration. He nodded slowly. "You will have it," he promised. "We will open the drive tonight. No more secrets." Lila nodded, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, the taste of him still lingering on her lips. They sat there in the dim light of the penthouse, the evidence of a murder between them, the heat of the kiss still vibrating in the air, waiting for the computer to decrypt the past. The atmosphere in the penthouse living room was thick enough to choke on. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a skyline scrubbed clean and sharp, but inside, the air was heavy with suspicion. Adrian had assembled his inner circle, the few people he trusted with his life, though after the breach at Lila's apartment, even that trust was fraying at the edges. Lila sat in a high-backed leather armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. Across from her sat Marco Ferris, the organization's consigliere. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair combed back severely and eyes that looked like flint. He had served Adrian's father, and his disapproval of Lila's presence was radiating off him in waves. Next to him was Elena, Adrian's cousin. She was striking, with sharp features and a posture that suggested she was ready to strike at any moment. She ran the family's legitimate nightclub interests and possessed a mind for numbers that rivaled any forensic accountant. Nico stood by the door, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the hallway. "This is a mistake, Adrian," Marco said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He didn't look at Lila. He spoke as if she were a piece of furniture. "We do not discuss family business in front of civilians, especially not civilians who bring this kind of heat." "She is not a civilian, Marco," Adrian said from his position by the window. He turned, his silhouette dark against the bright morning light. "She is the daughter of the woman who saved my life, and she is the one who found the drive. She stays." "She is a liability," Marco countered, leaning forward. "We have a leak. We know this. Someone tipped off the crew that tossed her apartment, bringing her here, involving her in the strategy. It exposes us." "I'm right here," Lila said, her voice cutting through the tension. She sat up straighter, meeting Marco's stony gaze. "And I'm not going anywhere. My mother died for whatever is on that flash drive. I am not going to sit in a guest room knitting while you decide what to do with her legacy." Elena raised an eyebrow, a flicker of impressed amusement crossing her face. "She has a point. Marco, it is her intel." Adrian moved to the center of the room. "The drive is with the tech team now. They are running a decryption algorithm on a standalone server. No internet connection. If the leak is digital, we are safe. If the leak is flesh and blood..." He let the sentence hang, his dark eyes sweeping over the three of them. "Then we have a bigger problem." "You think one of us turned?" Elena asked, offended. "I think someone knew Lila went to the bank," Adrian said coldly. "So until I know who, nobody leaves this building without my direct authorization. We are on lockdown." He turned to Lila. "However, we need verification on the context of the drive. The notes mention specific officers. We need to know if the timeline matches." "I know where to go," Lila said. "Riverton General. There is a doctor there, Dr. Hammond. He was the chief resident when my mom worked there. He sent flowers to her funeral. If anyone remembers that night, it is him." "It is too dangerous," Nico spoke up from the door. "We take the armored unit," Adrian decided. "In and out. I want to look this man in the eye before we open that file." Riverton General Hospital had changed in 10 years. The old brick facade was now covered in gleaming glass and steel, a testament to the donations, many of them from the Moretti family that had modernized the facility. Lila walked through the sterile white corridors next to Adrian. He walked with his usual confident stride, but his hand hovered constantly near the inside of his jacket. Nico trailed 3 paces behind, his head on a swivel. Doctor. Hammond was in his office, a small room cluttered with medical journals. He was older now, his hair completely white, glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up as they entered, and his eyes widened when he saw Adrian. "Mr. Moretti," Hammond said, standing up slowly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Doctor." "Hammond," Adrian said, closing the door and locking it. "I believe you remember Lila Carter." The doctor looked at Lila, squinting slightly. Then, recognition dawned, softening his tired face. "Danielle's girl. My God, you look just like her. We need to ask you about the night my mother died," Lila said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach. "Or rather, the night she treated Adrian 12 years ago." Hammond sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I wondered if this day would ever come." "Tell us what happened," Adrian commanded gently. "It was chaos," Hammond said, looking at the floor. "You came in with multiple gunshot wounds. We stabilized you. Then 2 officers arrived. They didn't identify themselves, but they were wearing Riverton PD uniforms. They told us to clear the trauma bay. They said it was a crime scene and they needed to secure the suspect. And," Lila pressed. "And Danielle refused," Hammond said, looking up at her with wet eyes. "She told them you were critical. She stood right by the gurney. I was in the hallway, scrubbing up. I heard one of them say," he said, "just let him bleed out. Nurse, save the city the paperwork. Or maybe you want to be a casualty too?" Lila gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked them dead in the eye, Hammond continued, his voice trembling with the memory. "And she hit the code button. She called a code blue on a stable patient just to flood the room with witnesses. She saved him. Lila, and she made powerful enemies doing it." Adrian's jaw was set so hard it looked like it might snap. "Thank you, Doctor. You have been very helpful." "She was a good woman," Hammond whispered as they turned to leave. "She didn't deserve what happened to her." The drive back to the penthouse was somber. Lila sat in the passenger seat of the black SUV, staring out at the industrial district passing by. The realization that her mother had literally stared down death to save a stranger was settling into her bones. "She was brave," Adrian said quietly from the driver's seat. He had insisted on driving, with Nico in the back, claiming he wanted control of the wheel. "She was stupid," Lila said, wiping a tear away. "She should have walked away. She should have thought about me." "She was thinking about what was right," Adrian said. "That is rarely the safe choice." They turned down a narrow street lined with abandoned warehouses, a shortcut to the highway. Suddenly, a black sedan shot out of a side alley, slamming into the side of their SUV with a deafening crunch of metal. Lila screamed as the heavy vehicle lurched sideways, skidding toward a concrete pillar. "Hold on!" Adrian roared, fighting the wheel. He corrected the skid just inches from the pillar, tires screeching. "Contact left," Nico shouted from the back seat. "2 vehicles, no plates." Another sedan roared up behind them, boxing them in. The rear window of the SUV shattered as gunfire erupted, the bullets sparking against the reinforced frame. "Get down!" Adrian yelled, shoving his hand across the console to push Lila's head toward her knees. Lila curled into a ball in the footwell, her hands over her head, her heart hammering like a trapped bird. The sound was deafening, the roar of engines, the thwack, thwack, thwack of bullets hitting the armored glass, the shouting. "Nico, clear a path," Adrian ordered, his voice terrifyingly calm amidst the chaos. Nico rolled down the shattered rear window and returned fire with a semi-automatic rifle. Brass casings clattered onto the leather seats. Adrian slammed the car into reverse, tires smoking, and rammed the sedan behind them. There was a sickening crunch of metal and glass. The sedan spun out, creating a gap. Adrian threw the SUV back into drive and floored it. The engine roared, and they shot forward, clipping the front bumper of the second attacker. "They are still coming," Nico shouted, Lila risked a glance up. Through the spider-webbed side mirror, she saw the second sedan pursuing them, a man leaning out the window with a gun. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a handgun. He didn't take his eyes off the road. He smashed the remains of his driver's side window with his elbow. "Take the wheel!" he shouted to Lila. "What?" Lila shrieked. "Grab the wheel, Lila, keep it straight." Lila scrambled up, grabbing the leather steering wheel with shaking hands. Adrian leaned out of the moving window, the wind whipping his hair. He took aim with chilling, practiced precision. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots behind them. The pursuing sedan swerved violently. The front tire blew out, and the car careened into a parked dumpster, flipping onto its side in a shower of sparks. Adrian pulled himself back in, holstering the weapon and taking the wheel back from Lila's frozen fingers. "We are clear," he said, his voice flat. "Nico, check for tails." "Clear," Nico confirmed, reloading his weapon. Lila sat back in her seat, trembling uncontrollably. She looked at Adrian. He was checking the mirrors, his face a mask of stone. He had just killed men, or tried to, without blinking. He had turned into a soldier in the blink of an eye, and he had done it to keep her alive. They didn't go back to the penthouse. It was too exposed. Adrian drove them to a safe house on the edge of the city, a nondescript brick house in a quiet working-class neighborhood. Inside, the house was dusty but functional. Adrian locked the heavy deadbolt and turned to face them. "Is everyone intact?" he asked. Lila was standing in the middle of the living room, brushing shards of safety glass out of her hair. She felt like she was vibrating. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind a volatile mix of horror and fury. "Intact?" she repeated, her voice rising. "We were almost killed. Adrian, people were shooting at us." "And we handled it," Adrian said, moving to the window to peek through the blinds. "This is the reality. Lila, I told you." "You told me." Lila laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You told me it was dangerous. You didn't tell me I would be driving a bullet-riddled car while you played action hero." "I did what I had to do to get you out," Adrian snapped, turning on her. The stress was cracking his composure now. His eyes were wild. "You enjoy it," Lila accused. "Was it?" Stepping toward him. "You are good at it. You killed those men without even flinching. That is who you are. You are just like them." "I am nothing like them," Adrian roared. He closed the distance between them, towering over her. "They are animals who kill for greed. I kill to protect what is mine. I am trying to drag my family out of the gutter, Lila. I am trying to build something clean. But when they come for me, when they come for you, I will burn the whole city down to stop them. Do not dare judge me for keeping you breathing." "I didn't ask you to save me," Lila yelled back, shoving his chest. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Your mother did," Adrian yelled, grabbing her wrists to stop her from shoving him again. "She saved me so I could save you. Don't you get it?" They froze, chests heaving, inches apart. The anger in the room was palpable, hot and suffocating. Lila looked up at him, seeing the blood on his collar from a scratch on his neck, the raw fear beneath his rage. He looked terrifying. He looked magnificent. She didn't know who moved first. One moment they were screaming, and the next, they were colliding. Adrian's hands released her wrists and tangled into her hair, pulling her face to his. Lila's hands grabbed the lapels of his ruined suit jacket, yanking him down. Their mouths met in a desperate, bruising kiss. It wasn't gentle. It tasted of copper and fear. It was a release of death-defying tension, a frantic affirmation that they were both still alive. Lila made a sound against his mouth, opening to him. Adrian groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her chest. He walked her backward until her back hit the hallway wall. His body pressed against hers, hard and heavy, pinning her there. His hands slid down her back, gripping her waist, pulling her hips flush against his. Lila felt the heat of him through her clothes, the undeniable evidence of his desire. She wrapped her legs around his waist as he lifted her, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "Lila," he gasped against her neck, biting lightly at the sensitive skin there. "God, Lila." He carried her down the hall, kicking the bedroom door open. He lowered her onto the mattress, following her down. His weight a comforting blanket. His hands were everywhere, on her waist, her thighs, cupping her face. Lila reached for his shirt, popping a button in her haste to touch his skin. She needed to feel his heart beating. She needed to know he was real. Adrian kissed her deeply, his tongue tangling with hers, the rhythm mimicking the frantic beat of the chase. He pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes dilated, black pools of want. He moved his hand to her shirt, his fingers brushing the skin of her stomach. Then he stopped. His hand froze on the hem of her shirt. His breathing was ragged, harsh in the quiet room. He squeezed his eyes shut, a look of physical pain crossing his face. "Adrian," Lila whispered, breathless, reaching for him. He pulled back. He pushed himself off her and sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her, head in his hands. "I can't," he choked out. "What?" Lila sat up, confusion washing over her. "I can't do this," Adrian said, his voice steeling itself. He stood up and walked to the window, keeping his back to her. "Not now. Not while they are hunting us. If we do this, I will lose my edge. I will be thinking about you instead of the threat, and that will get you killed." Lila smoothed her shirt down, feeling cold and exposed, but as she looked at his rigid shoulders, she realized he was right. He was denying himself to keep her safe. It was the ultimate act of discipline. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Okay." An hour later, Nico arrived at the safe house with the laptop. He looked grim. "The tech team finished," Nico said, setting the ruggedized computer on the dining table. "They beamed the file over before they wiped the server." Adrian sat at the table, still wearing his torn shirt. Lila sat opposite him. The sexual tension was still there, a low hum in the room, but it was buried under the weight of the coming truth. "Open it," Adrian said. Nico typed in the decryption key and hit enter. A spreadsheet filled the screen. It was a ledger, an accounting of payoffs, bribes, and illegal shipments going back 15 years. "There," Adrian said, pointing to a column. "Kovac. He's been taking cuts from human trafficking rings since he was a patrolman. And here," Lila said, pointing to another name, "Councilman Sterling. He's the one running for mayor on an anti-crime platform. He's on the payroll," Adrian confirmed, disgust in his voice. "This destroys them, all of them." "Wait," Lila said, leaning closer. She squinted at the column marked Authorized By. Most of the entries were initialed by various lieutenants. But the large payments, the ones to the police, the ones to the judges, the ones that facilitated the worst of the trafficking, were signed with a distinct looping signature, G.M. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. "G.M.?" she whispered. "Giovanni Moretti." Adrian went still. He stared at the screen, his face turning an ashen gray. "No," he muttered. "My father. He ran numbers. He ran protection. He had lines he didn't cross. Look at the dates." "Adrian," Lila said, her voice shaking. She pointed to an entry dated 12 years ago, the week her mother saved him. "Payment to Officer Miller. Authorization G. Us Mem. Note. Clean up loose ends at General." Lila recoiled as if the laptop had burned her. "He paid them," she realized, the horror crashing down on her. "Your father paid the cops to kill you." "That doesn't make sense," Adrian said, his voice cracking. "I am his son." "Maybe you were a liability too," Nico suggested quietly from the corner. "You were talking about legitimate business even back then. Boss, maybe Giovanni didn't like the direction you were taking the family." "And my mother," Lila continued, her voice rising. She wasn't just witnessing police corruption. She was witnessing a father trying to murder his son. And then, she scrolled down. 2 years later, the date of Danielle's death, payment to Kovac crew, authorization G, note, silence the nurse. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Lila stood up slowly. She felt cold, so incredibly cold. "Your father ordered the hit," she said, looking at Adrian. "The Moretti family killed my mother." Adrian stared at the screen, his world fracturing. He looked up at Lila, his eyes full of a devastation she had never seen. "Lila," he pleaded, standing up and reaching for her. "I didn't know. I swear on my life, I didn't know." Lila took a step back, flinching away from his touch. It doesn't matter if you knew," she said, her voice hollow. "It is your name. It is your money. The empire you are trying to save, it was built on her blood." "I am not him," Adrian insisted, desperation clawing at his voice. "I am the man who is trying to expose this." "You are the man who is defending his legacy," Lila said, backing toward the door of the room. "And his legacy is murder." "Lila, please," Adrian said, stepping around the table. "Don't do this. We're in this together. They want us both dead." "We are not together," Lila said, tears streaming down her face. "We are just stuck." She turned and walked into the small bedroom, slamming the door and locking it. Adrian stood in the living room, staring at the closed door, then at the damning glow of the laptop screen. He looked at Nico, who looked away. Unable to meet his boss's eyes, Adrian sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. He had found the truth he wanted, and it had cost him everything. His father was a monster, and the woman he was falling in love with was on the other side of a locked door, rightfully hating the blood that ran in his veins. But as the sun began to set outside the safe house, casting long shadows across the floor, Adrian knew one thing. He would still burn the world down to keep her safe, even if she never looked at him with warmth again. The silence in the executive office of the Moretti Corporation was absolute. Outside the soundproof glass, the city of Riverton was waking up, a gray dawn bleeding through the skyscrapers, but inside, the air was stagnant. Adrian Moretti sat behind his mahogany desk, a glass of untouched amber liquid sitting near his right hand. He was not looking at the city. He was staring at the oil painting on the far wall. It was a portrait of Giovanni Moretti. The artist had captured the man's commanding presence, the sharp jawline that Adrian had inherited, and the steely, unforgiving eyes that had terrified half the eastern seaboard for 30 years. Adrian had looked at that face with a mixture of fear and reverence. He had been raised on stories of his father's code, loyalty above all, family before self, silence until death. Now, all Adrian could see was a monster who had signed a death warrant for his own son. "He sat right there," Adrian said, his voice rough from a sleepless night. "He sat in this chair, Nico, and he ordered a hit on me because I was asking too many questions about the trafficking routes, and then he paid to have Danielle killed because she saved me." Nico was standing by the window, his silhouette rigid against the morning light. He had been with Adrian since they were teenagers, his loyalty absolute, but even he looked shaken by the revelations on the flash drive. "It was a different time, boss," Nico said quietly, though the defense sounded weak. "Giovanni, he believed the business had to be protected at any cost." "I am not the business," Adrian snapped, swiveling his chair to face his security chief. "I was his blood, and she was an innocent woman." He picked up the flash drive, which was sitting on the desk like a loaded weapon. The weight of it was negligible, but the data inside was heavy enough to crush an empire. "I am done, Nico," Adrian said. "I'm not just cleaning house. I am burning the foundation." Nico turned, his brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" "I am considering turning the ledger over," Adrian said. "To the authorities. All of it, the payoffs, the routes, the names, including my father's." Nico's eyes widened. "That is suicide. Adrian, you break Omerta, and every family from here to Chicago will want your head. You will go to prison." "Maybe," Adrian said, looking back at the portrait. "But the Kovac crew goes down with me, and the corrupt cops, and the councilmen. It ends the cycle. It is the only way to make sure Lila is actually safe when this is over." "Lila is gone, Adrian," Nico reminded him gently. "She left the safe house an hour ago." Adrian flinched as if he had been struck. "I know, but just because she left doesn't mean I stopped protecting her." Lila sat on the worn velvet couch in Mia's apartment, her knees pulled up to her chest. The apartment was small, smelling of vanilla incense and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of Adrian's penthouse. It was cluttered, cozy, and normal. It felt completely alien. Mia walked in from the kitchenette, handing Lila a steaming mug of tea. Mia was short, fierce, and had been Lila's best friend since the 3rd grade. She was currently wearing her bartending uniform, having just come off a night shift, but she refused to sleep until Lila stopped shaking. "You should have called the police," Mia said, sitting on the coffee table so she could face Lila. "Not the mob boyfriend, the actual police." "I couldn't," Lila whispered, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "The police are on the payroll. Mia, that is the whole point. Half the reason my mom died is because she couldn't trust the cops." "So what is the plan?" Mia asked, her voice sharp with worry. "You just hide here until this Mafia prince fixes everything? Lila, look at you. You are a mess. You are involved with a man who has bulletproof windows in his car. This isn't a romance novel. This is how people get killed." "I know," Lila said, staring into the dark tea. "I know it is dangerous. I told him that. That is why I left." "But," Mia pressed, knowing her friend too well. Lila looked up, her eyes swimming with exhausted tears. "But when we were in that safe house, when the shooting stopped, he held me. And Mia, I was terrified. But part of me felt safer in his arms than I have ever felt in my entire life. He would burn the world down for me. I saw it in his eyes. That is exactly what I am afraid of," Mia said softly. "Men who burn worlds usually take the women they love down with the ash." Lila didn't answer. She knew Mia was right. Logic dictated that she should run as far as possible. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face when he realized his father's betrayal. She saw the boy her mother had saved, grown into a man desperately trying to be better than his bloodline. "I need to sleep," Mia said finally, standing up and stretching. "I have a double shift starting at 5. You stay here. Lock the deadbolt. Don't open it for anyone but me. I promise," Lila said. Mia went into her bedroom, closing the door. Lila sat in the silence, her phone resting on the cushion beside her. She picked it up, her thumb hovering over Adrian's contact. She wanted to text him. She wanted to know he was okay. She set the phone down. "Stop it," she told herself. "It is over." 2 hours passed. The apartment was quiet. Lila dozed fitfully on the couch, waking up every time a car honked outside, at 2 in the afternoon. Her phone buzzed. Lila jumped, grabbing it. It wasn't a text from Adrian, it was a message from an unknown number. No text, just a video file. Frowning, Lila pressed play. The video was low quality, grainy and dim. It showed a wooden chair in the center of a concrete room. Lila's heart stopped. Mia was tied to the chair. There was duct tape over Mia's mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror, mascara running down her cheeks. A bruise was already blooming on her temple. She was struggling against the ropes, making muffled, panicked sounds. A hand entered the frame, a hand wearing a black leather glove. It grabbed Mia's hair, yanking her head back roughly. "Look at the camera," a voice said. It was distorted, synthesized to sound deep and robotic. The camera zoomed in on Mia's terrified face. "You have something that belongs to us. Miss Carter," the voice said. "The flash drive. We know you have it. We know you left the safe house." The view shifted to a wall where a piece of paper was taped. On it, an address was scrawled in black marker. "You have 1 hour," the voice continued. "Bring the drive to this address, alone. No Moretti guards, no cops. If we see a single tail, if we see a single police cruiser, your friend bleeds out on this floor. Just you and the truth your mother died for." The video ended. Lila dropped the phone, gasping for air. The room spun. Mia. They had Mia. She must have been grabbed when she left the apartment earlier. Lila had thought she was sleeping in the bedroom, but Mia must have slipped out to go to the store or work. Guilt crashed over Lila like a tidal wave. This was her fault. Mia was right. Being close to Adrian put a target on everyone she loved. "Think," Lila commanded herself, slapping her own cheeks. "Think, Lila." She couldn't call the police. The Kovac crew owned them. She couldn't call Adrian to bring his army. The message was clear. If they saw guards, Mia died. She had to go alone. Lila ran to her bag. She dug through the side pocket and pulled out the silver flash drive. She had taken it from the table at the safe house during the argument, almost by instinct, unwilling to leave her mother's legacy behind. She gripped it tightly. This was the leverage. She checked the address from the video. 1402 River Road. Lila froze. She knew that area. It was the abandoned warehouse district on the edge of the river. It was the exact same 3-block radius where her mother's body had been found 10 years ago. The symbolism was cruel and deliberate. Lila grabbed her jacket. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. If she went in there alone, she was likely walking to her execution. They would kill her the moment they had the drive. She needed a fail-safe. With trembling fingers, she opened her messaging app and drafted a text to Adrian. "They have Mia. I am going to the old warehouse district on River Road. I have the drive. I am trading it for her life. Do not come in guns blazing or they will kill her. If I don't make it out, know that I never wanted to leave you. I just wanted the truth." She attached the video file to the message. Then, she pressed the options menu and selected Schedule Send. She set the time for 30 minutes from now. By the time Adrian got this, she would already be inside, and he wouldn't have time to intercept her on the road and ruin the exchange. "I'm coming. Mia," Lila whispered. She opened the door and ran out into the hallway. The warehouse was a rotting husk of industrial decay. The roof had partially collapsed, and the windows were jagged teeth of broken glass. The smell of the river, brackish water and oil, hung heavy in the air. Lila parked Mia's car a block away and walked the rest of the distance. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She held her hands up, showing she was unarmed. The flash drive clenched in her right fist. The main bay door was slid open just enough to admit a person. Lila squeezed through. Stepping into the gloom, "I am here!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the rusted metal beams. "I brought it!" Movement stirred in the shadows. Floodlights suddenly snapped on, blinding her. Lila shielded her eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. "Drop the bag," a voice commanded. Lila let her purse slide off her shoulder to the concrete floor. "Step forward." She walked into the circle of light, in the center of the vast space. Mia was tied to a chair, just like in the video. She was conscious, her eyes wide and pleading. A man in a ski mask stood behind her, a gun pressed to her temple. 3 other men emerged from the darkness. They were armed with assault rifles, wearing dark tactical gear. The Kovac crew. "Let her go," Lila said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I have the drive. Let her walk out and I will give it to you." "That is not how this works, sweetheart," a smooth voice said from the upper walkway. Lila looked up. A figure was descending the metal staircase. He was not wearing a mask. He was wearing an expensive suit, though the hem of his trousers was stained with dust. Lila gasped. It was Marco Ferris, Adrian's consigliere, the man who had sat in the penthouse yesterday and argued against her presence, the man who had served Adrian's father for 40 years. "Marco," Lila breathed. "It is you." Marco reached the ground floor and walked toward her, a look of calm, arrogant pity on his face. "I told Adrian you were a liability," Marco said, smoothing his tie. "I told him you would bring the house down. He wouldn't listen. The boy is blinded by the same weakness that infected him the night your mother saved him." "You are the leak," Lila realized, the pieces falling into place. "You told Kovac where the safe house was. You ordered the hit on the SUV. I have been working with Kovac for 3 years, Marco admitted without shame. Because Adrian is weak. He wants to go legitimate. He wants to build condos and fund charities. He's forgetting who we are. We are predators. Lila, if we stop hunting, we get eaten. So you betrayed him? Lila spat. You betrayed his father? Marco laughed, a dry, rasping sound. I honored his father. Giovanni knew that power requires blood. Adrian thinks he can wash his hands clean. I am doing this to save the organization. Kovac understands the old ways. Once Adrian is out of the way, we will merge the territories. You are disgusting, Lila said. I am a realist, Marco said. He held out his hand. Give me the drive, and I will make it quick for both of you. Lila took a step back, clutching the drive to her chest. You said you would let her go. I lied, Marco said simply. Loose ends, my dear. Just like your mother. Lila's blood ran cold. You were there, she whispered. 10 years ago. You were part of that, too. I drove the car, Marco said, his eyes dead. Giovanni gave the order, but I made sure it was done. Your mother was a stubborn woman. She refused to hand over her notebook. She died thinking she was a martyr. Rage, hot and white, flooded Lila's veins, momentarily eclipsing her fear. This man had watched her mother die. Come and get it, Lila hissed, backing away toward a stack of pallets. She needed to stall. She needed time. Marco sighed and signaled the guard holding Mia. Shoot the friend. No. Lila screamed, holding the drive over the edge of a drainage grate in the floor. You shoot her, and I drop this. It goes right into the storm drain. You will never get the encryption key. You will never get the accounts. Marco held up a hand, stopping the gunman. He looked at Lila with annoyed respect. You have fire, he noted. Fine. We wait. Hand it over, Lila. Don't be stupid. Tell me why, Lila demanded, her eyes darting to the exits. Why didn't you just kill Adrian in his sleep? Why all this theater? Because Adrian needs to be made an example of, Marco said, stepping closer. The streets need to see that going soft gets you killed. Lila checked her watch surreptitiously. 32 minutes. The message should have sent. In the Moretti executive office, Adrian's phone vibrated against the wood of his desk. He picked it up, expecting a status report from the tech team. He saw the name Lila and opened the message. He read the text. He watched the first 5 seconds of the video. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a marble statue. The glass in his hand shattered, amber liquid and shards exploding across the desk. Nico! Adrian roared, a sound so primal it shook the walls. Nico burst in from the outer office, hand already on his weapon. Boss? They have her, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Marco has her at the River Road warehouse. Marco? Nico looked stunned. The consigliere? He is the traitor, Adrian said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. His movements were precise, mechanical, fueled by a terrifying focus. Get the team. Get the armored unit. We can be there in 15 minutes, Nico said, reaching for his radio. No. Adrian stopped him. The message says no guards. If we roll up with a convoy, they kill the hostage. Adrian looked at the phone again. Lila had gone alone to save her friend. She was walking into a trap to protect him from his own enemies. He couldn't just storm in. Marco would execute them the moment he saw a Moretti car. Adrian made a choice. He scrolled through his contacts and stopped on a number he had never dialed, only saved for emergencies. Detective Hayes. Hayes was one of the few honest cops left in Riverton. He had been chasing the Moretti family for years, but he played by the book. Adrian hit call. This is Hayes, a gruff voice answered. This is Adrian Moretti. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I assume you are calling to turn yourself in? Moretti? I am calling to make a trade, Adrian said, walking toward the elevator. I have the ledger, everything. 15 years of my family's crimes, the Kovac organization, the corrupt officers in your precinct, and the councilman. It is all on a drive. I am listening, Hayes said, his tone shifting instantly. I will give it to you. I will give you Kovac. I will give you Marco Ferris. I will give you the keys to the city, Adrian said, stepping into the elevator. What is the price? Hayes asked. There is a warehouse on River Road, 1402. My consigliere is holding 2 civilians hostage. I am going in there. You bring your task force. You surround the perimeter, you wait for my signal. If this is a trap, Moretti. It is the end of the line. Detective, Adrian said, watching the floor numbers count down. I want out. I want them safe. If you get your men there in 10 minutes, you get the career-making bust of the century. If you are late, you get a morgue. We are rolling, Hayes said. Adrian hung up. He looked at his reflection in the polished metal doors. He looked like his father, but as the doors opened to the garage, he knew he was about to do the one thing Giovanni never would have done. He was going to sacrifice the power to save the person. He got into his car, alone. Hold on, Lila, he whispered, revving the engine. I'm coming. The industrial district of Riverton was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the amber glow of distant street lamps and the harsh halogen floodlights inside the warehouse at 1402 River Road, outside. The silence was deceptive. In the shadows of the surrounding alleyways, unmarked sedans sat with their engines idling low. Adrian Moretti crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers 50 yards from the main entrance. His breathing was steady, but his heart was hammering a rhythm of pure dread against his ribs. Beside him, Nico checked the magazine of his sidearm, further back, in the gloom. Detective Hayes signaled his team to hold their positions. "We wait for the signal," Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind coming off the river. "If we breach too early, Marco kills them. If we wait too long—" He didn't finish the sentence. He checked his watch. It had been 40 minutes since Lila's message. Every second that ticked by felt like a tightening noose. Inside the cavernous warehouse, the air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of fear. Lila stood in the center of the concrete floor, her legs trembling but her chin held high. She clutched the silver flash drive in her hand, holding it over the drainage grate like a grenade. Mia was still tied to the chair, weeping silently, a bruise darkening on her cheek. Marco Ferris stood near her, checking his phone with impatient agitation. From the shadows of the upper gantry, a heavy, slow clap echoed through the space. Very dramatic. A deep voice sneered, "Just like her mother." Lila spun around as a man descended the stairs. He was massive, with a shaved head and a neck tattoo of a scorpion. Victor Kovac, the head of the rival crew, the man who had terrorized the city for a decade. "Kovac," Lila said, her voice steadying, "I wondered when you would show your face." "I wanted to see the girl who caused us so much trouble," Kovac said, reaching the ground floor and walking toward her. He stopped a few feet away, towering over her. "You Carter women, you never know when to just walk away." "My mother didn't walk away because she had a conscience." Lila spat. "Something you wouldn't understand." Kovac laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Conscience? Is that what you call it? I call it stupidity. Your mother wasn't some random victim, girl. She was a nuisance." "I know," Lila said. "She was investigating you." "She was refusing orders," Kovac roared, his amusement vanishing. "We gave her a choice that night. Hand over the ledger she stole from the administrator's office. Let the Moretti kid bleed out on the table. It was simple. But no, she had to play hero. She had to save the boy." Lila felt the blood drain from her face. "You killed her because she saved Adrian." "We killed her because she wouldn't obey," Kovac sneered, leaning in close. "Giovanni Moretti paid us to clean up the mess, but your mother made it difficult. She kept records. She threatened to go to the federal board, so we silenced her, the nurse who wouldn't obey. And now, you're doing the exact same thing." The revelation hit Lila like a physical blow. The image of her mother, standing defiant in a hospital room, refusing to let a young man die. Even as powerful men signed her death warrant, Giovanni Moretti and Victor Kovac, they had shaken hands over her mother's body. And the man she loved carried the name of the man who paid for the bullet. "She was worth 10 of you," Lila said, her voice shaking with rage, tears burning in her eyes. "She was a hero, and you were just a hired thug in a cheap suit." Kovac's face twisted in fury. He pulled a handgun from his waistband. "Enough talk, Marco. Get the drive." Marco stepped forward, reaching for Lila's hand. "Give it to me, Lila, it is over." Lila looked at the grate. She looked at Mia. She looked at the gun in Kovac's hand. "Now!" Marco shouted, lunging for her. Crash! The massive rolling metal door at the front of the warehouse exploded inward. A heavy truck rammed through the metal, sending debris flying. "Police! Drop your weapons!" A voice amplified by a megaphone boomed from outside. Chaos erupted. "It is a trap!" Marco screamed, scrambling back. Adrian and his men surged through the breach, moving behind the cover of the truck. Gunfire cracked through the air, deafening in the enclosed space. Kovac's men on the gantry returned fire, bullets sparking off the steel beams and splintering the wooden crates. "Get to cover!" Adrian roared, firing 2 controlled shots at the upper walkway, forcing the gunman to duck. Lila dropped to the floor, crawling toward Mia. She fumbled with the knots on Mia's wrists, her fingers slick with sweat. "Lila, look out!" Mia screamed through her gag. Lila looked up. Kovac was not running. He was standing amidst the chaos, his eyes locked on her with murderous hate. He raised his gun, aiming directly at her chest. "Die like your mother!" Kovac shouted. Time seemed to slow down. Lila saw the black barrel of the gun. She saw Kovac's finger tighten on the trigger. She couldn't move. Then, a blur of motion cut across her vision. Adrian had seen it. He broke from cover, sprinting across the open floor with zero regard for his own safety. He didn't fire. He threw himself into the line of fire. Bang! The shot echoed, louder than the rest. Adrian's body jerked violently in midair. He collapsed onto the concrete just 2 feet in front of Lila, sliding to a halt. "No!" Lila screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. Kovac prepared to fire again, but Detective Hayes and a SWAT team swarmed through the side doors. "Drop it! On the ground!" Kovac cursed and turned to run, sprinting toward the rear exit, clutching the flash drive that Lila had dropped in the confusion. Lila didn't watch him go. She scrambled on her hands and knees to Adrian. He was lying on his back, his face pale, teeth gritted in agony. A dark stain was spreading rapidly across the white shirt beneath his suit jacket, just above his hip. "Adrian!" Lila sobbed, her hands hovering over him, shaking uncontrollably. "Adrian, look at me! Are you okay?" Adrian gasped, his voice strained and wet. I am fine because of you." Lila cried. She pressed her hands down hard on the wound, trying to stem the flow of blood. History was horrifyingly repeating itself. Another Carter woman, on her knees, fighting to keep a Moretti man alive while sirens wailed in the distance. "Pressure," Lila muttered to herself, channeling her mother's voice. "Apply pressure. Keep him talking. Don't you dare close your eyes. Adrian Moretti," Lila ordered, her voice breaking. "Stay with me. You promised we would burn it down. Lila," he whispered, his hand coming up to cover hers, his fingers weak. I got the bad guys." At the rear of the warehouse, Kovac reached the exit door, but he fumbled with the latch. He heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, raising his gun. He didn't see Lila. She had left Adrian for a split second, grabbing a heavy metal pipe from the floor. Fueled by a decade of grief and a moment of pure, blinding rage, she swung it with all her might. The pipe connected with Kovac's shins. He howled in pain and crumpled to the floor, the gun skittering away. Before he could rise, Detective Hayes was there, a boot on Kovac's back. Hayes slammed the cuffs onto Kovac's wrists, ratcheting them tight. "Victor Kovac," Hayes announced, his voice grim with satisfaction. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and the murder of Danielle Carter." Across the room, Marco Ferris, bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, spotted a fallen pistol near the crates. He lunged for it, desperate to take one last shot at the man he had betrayed. "Watch out!" Nico shouted from the entryway. Adrian, still on the floor, saw Marco move. With a groan of agony, he rolled onto his side and kicked out, his boot connected with Marco's wrist, sending the gun flying. Ignoring the pain tearing through his side, Adrian grabbed Marco by the lapels and slammed him into the concrete. He pinned him there, his forearm pressing against Marco's throat. Adrian picked up the gun. He pressed the barrel to Marco's forehead. The warehouse went silent. The police lowered their weapons, watching. Lila held her breath. Marco stared up at him, defiance in his eyes. "Do it," he hissed. "Be your father's son." Adrian's hand shook. His breathing was ragged. He looked at Marco, the man who had raised him, the man who had ordered the hit on his own blood. Then he looked at Lila, who was watching him with wide, tear-filled eyes. He remembered the promise. A different future. Adrian pulled the gun away. He engaged the safety and tossed it to Detective Hayes. "No," Adrian said, his voice ringing with a finality that shattered the Moretti legacy forever. "I want him to live. I want him to sit in a cell for the rest of his miserable life and answer for what he did. Get him out of my sight." Hayes nodded, signaling his officers to take Marco away. "CT." Adrian slumped back against the crates, his strength finally failing. Lila was there instantly, pulling his head into her lap, stroking his hair as the paramedics rushed in. "You did it," she whispered, tears falling onto his face. "You broke the cycle." "We did it," Adrian murmured, his eyes slipping shut as the darkness took him. The weeks that followed were a blur of sterile hospital rooms and the flashing lights of news cameras. Adrian underwent 2 surgeries to repair the damage to his abdomen. He survived, his constitution as strong as his will. From his hospital bed, under the watchful eye of federal marshals, Adrian gave his testimony. He held nothing back. He handed over the flash drive, the ledger, and the decryption key. He detailed 15 years of operations, implicating Councilman Sterling, the corrupt precinct chief, and dismantling the Kovac syndicate piece by piece. He also laid bare the crimes of his own father, destroying the myth of the honorable Moretti family once and for all. Lila spent every evening by his bedside. The emotional toll was heavy. She mourned her mother all over again, the fresh details of her death a sharp wound. She wrestled with her anger at the name Moretti. But every time she looked at Adrian, pale, scarred, but finally free of the secrets, she found her gratitude outweighing her resentment. "I don't know how to forgive the name," she told him one rainy Tuesday night, holding his hand as he slept fitfully. Adrian opened his eyes, looking at her with clear, lucid focus. "You don't have to forgive the name, Lila. You just have to decide if you can love the man who is trying to change it." Lila squeezed his hand. "I think I already do." 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. The trial of the century. The papers called it. But today wasn't a trial. It was a sentencing hearing. Adrian stood before the judge, wearing a simple gray suit. He had accepted a plea deal. In exchange for his cooperation and the dismantling of 2 crime families, he would serve a reduced sentence in a low-security federal facility. "Mr. Moretti," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "your cooperation has been unprecedented. However, you must pay for your part in this history." "I understand, Your Honor," Adrian said, his voice steady. "I am ready." As the bailiffs moved to escort him away, Adrian turned. He scanned the gallery until he found her. Lila was sitting in the front row, wearing her mother's angel necklace. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. A sad, proud smile. Adrian looked at her, and for a brief moment he placed his hand over his side, the spot where the bullet had hit him, and the spot where Danielle Carter had saved him 12 years ago. Lila placed her hand over her own heart in response. He nodded once, and then he was gone. 18 months passed. The seasons turned in Riverton. The snow melted, the rains came, and finally, a warm, golden autumn settled over the city. On a quiet street in the revitalized downtown district, a new sign hung over a renovated storefront. Danielle's Place, Community Legal and Counseling Center. Lila sat at the reception desk, organizing files for the afternoon support group. The center was busy. Families who had been chewed up by the city's gang violence came here for help, for legal aid, for a safe place to talk. It was the legacy Danielle should have had. The bell above the door chimed. "We are closing up in 5 minutes," Lila called out without looking up. "I was hoping I could still catch the owner." Lila froze. The pen dropped from her fingers. She looked up. Adrian stood in the doorway. He looked different. The expensive Italian suits were gone, replaced by a sturdy canvas jacket and dark jeans. His hair was a little longer, his skin tanned from working outdoors. He had started a small construction and security firm after his release, rebuilding the neighborhoods his family had once exploited. He looked healthy. He looked free. "Adrian," Lila breathed. Standing up, he walked toward her, his eyes taking in every inch of her face as if he were memorizing her all over again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a rectangular object wrapped in brown paper. He set it gently on her desk. Lila unwrapped it. It was the silver frame, the photo of her mother, smiling in her nurse's uniform. "I thought this belonged here," Adrian said softly. Lila ran her fingers over the glass. "You kept it." "She is the reason I am standing here," Adrian said. He looked at Lila, his gaze intense and vulnerable. "She saved my life twice. Lila once by pulling me back from death in that emergency room, and again by bringing you into my world to save my soul." Lila walked around the desk. The space between them seemed to vibrate with the time they had lost and the future they had won. "Are you okay?" she asked, reaching up to cup his face. "I am," Adrian said, leaning into her touch. "I am just a guy who runs a construction crew now. No empire, no guards, just me. That is all I ever wanted," Lila whispered. She looked into his eyes and saw the peace there, hard-won, scarred, but real. The darkness of the past was still a shadow, but they were standing in the light. Lila pulled him down to her. They kissed. It wasn't the desperate, fearful kiss of the safe house. It was deep, lingering, and full of promise. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground, holding her close as if he intended to never let her go again. Outsy. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. They rested their foreheads together, breathing in the scent of each other. "I'm not afraid anymore," Lila whispered against his lips. "As long as you keep choosing this. Every day," Adrian promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Every choice I make from now on will honor the woman in that photograph and the woman in my arms." Lila smiled, burying her face in his neck. They had walked through the fire and the blood, and on the other side, they had found something stronger than power and deeper than fear. They had found a love forged in truth. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. "Why is my mother's picture here?" she asked. Mafia boss smiled. "Because she once saved my life." I hope you enjoyed the journey of Lila and Adrian as they fought for truth and redemption. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Do you think Adrian redeemed himself? Was justice served for Danielle? Share your opinions in English in the comments below. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.